Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my June album review roundup, another episode in what's becoming my favorite feature on this channel, honestly. My chance to give you guys my list of my favorite records of the month that I've been enjoying. I'm usually do a top 10 list, but there's less albums throughout the month of June that came to my attention, so I'm actually doing a top 5 list, but all 5 are excellent records. All 5 are in contention for my favorite album of the year, so don't click away. There's still some great records, and I'm going to do some honorable mentions really quick. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible, but I do want to give more time and space to the top 5 because most of them I haven't reviewed yet on the channel, and I've been debating about this, about what is worthy of giving it its own review on the channel and what should I wait to do as album roundups. And based on the views that I get on various reviews, kind of taking you behind the curtain a little bit, when I do a review for like a lesser known band, it gets very little views. It doesn't get the attention that it deserves, that I wish it got. But when I do the bigger bands like Jethro Tull or Yes, or, those big name progressive rock artists, I'll get a lot of views for those reviews because I think a lot of people are curious what my thoughts are about those. So I plan to still do those on the bigger progressive artists. If Dream Theater comes out with a new record, anything Neil Morse related, Big Train, these bigger names in the scene, which, is up to subjective opinion. What are the bigger artists and what are not. But I think for the lesser known ones, the more independent, the newer bands, I think it's better to put them in these roundup episodes because more people are inclined to click on this roundup of recommendations rather than a singular review about something they've never heard of before. I think this is a better format. It's going to reach more people's eyes and ears. And so that's what I'm going for in this episode. So without further ado, I'm going to try to hit these honorable mentions pretty quickly that have come to my attention but didn't quite crack my top 5 list, and then I'll get into the top 5 proper. So let's get into it. All right, first we've got Built for the Future and their album 2084 Empire, crossover prog from the United States. This is their 4th record, their 2nd in this kind of album series. Their previous record was 2084 Heretic in 2023, and this is more standard progressive rock, neo prog, perhaps a little bit heavier, a little bit darker. Of course, there's some darker kind of themes here, as you could tell from just the title of the record. But it's a dynamic duo, Kenny Bissett and Patrick Farrell, who are multi-instrumentalists, both proficient in their instrumentation. And there's some really great stuff on here that I've been enjoying. Just a lot of material to unpack. It's like 90 minutes of music here. It's basically like 2 albums combined into one. So a lot of material. And sometimes it's kind of a darker listen, so I don't listen to it constantly, but really respect and appreciate. I think there's some really solid material if you're into that kind of darker neo-prog stuff. I think this could be really interesting to you guys. Also, out on June 5th was SLIFT and their album Fantasia, psychedelic space rock from France, more stoner, doom metal, that kind of stuff. Their previous album, Alien from 2024, was very well regarded in this space. This album, musically, I really enjoy a lot of it. There's some really cool riffs, some, cool heavy instrumentation, some psychedelic kind of Pink Floyd-y kind of undertones at times too. The vocals are what really caused me to have an issue with this band. And of course, that's just personal preference because they have these kind of gruff vocals. I wouldn't quite say they're full on like death metal growling stuff, but it's just very harsh vocals that aren't very melodic and very interesting to my ears, at least, who likes more of that melodic side of the equation. But like I said, musically, there's a lot to enjoy here. Some really fascinating kind of doomy stoner metal stuff mixed in with some psychedelic prog. Really cool. And so I wanted to make sure to mention it in the honorable mentions. I've also been enjoying this album by A.A. Williams called Solstice, alternative metal from the UK. You could call it post-doom metal, something along those lines, but very melancholy, very dark, very moody, but beautifully composed. Some really great singer-songwriter sensibilities here to it as well. Some poetic, beautiful lyrics. slow burn moments that build and build to really great heights. I just really think it's melodically satisfying, just really beautifully done. A great new artist that I hadn't heard of before. So if you want to check this out, if you're into that more post-metal kind of doomy kind of feel, this might be for you. It's not too overtly heavy. It's not too aggressive to me. But it does have this kind of sense of darkness to it. But her vocals are just fantastic. So really great record, and wanted to mention it in my honorable mentions here. I also discovered this record, Oh Hiroshima and the Dead Tree Gives No Shelter. This is post-rock from Sweden. Really fantastic record as well. Very dense, very beautiful. Like any kind of post-rock, it has moments of just pure beauty and joy, and just moments that really sit back in the makes and have these more ambient feel, and then moments that hit you harder and that come more intensely. And they balance that stuff really well. There's some interesting, fairly good vocals on here. So I thought this was enjoyable. I'm still dabbling my toes in this kind of post-rock world, so I'm not like a huge, massive post-rock guy, but I've been enjoying certain specific releases, and this has been one. I really like Sleep Makes Waves from a few years ago. That was one of my favorite records of the year, a post-rock album. So this is really touching me. I really like this a lot. A great band from Sweden with some really cool, interesting things going on in their music. On June 19th, Prince of Failure came out with their self-titled record. This is basically a collaboration between Daniel Tompkins, who's part of Tesseract now, the frontman, has an incredible voice, and Paul Ortiz is the other person here from Chimp Spanner. And it's a really solid record. Sounds very polished, sounds very modern, basically in this kind of djent, alternative metal world. Some harsher moments, but some more catchy, more accessible moments. There's almost like a pop sheen to this in some moments, and in the production value. So, but I will, even though I enjoy my listening of this, I think it's pretty solid all the way through. I do find it to feel a bit samey throughout the record, and that certain things don't necessarily stand out to me. It's like one of those experiences where the whole album is enjoyable as I'm listening, but then I don't really remember anything from it after the fact, and I'm not super invested to want to return to it. But really pleasant, really well done, really well played, really well produced. Just fantastic musicians. And I really love Daniel Tompkins' vocals. He's kind of a next level talent, and this showcases him really well. So definitely check it out if you're a fan of Tesseract. I think it's a no-brainer pick. But my love of Tesseract is kind of off and on, so I'm not the hugest Tesseract guy. So this one's a little bit mixed, but mostly positive. I've been enjoying it. And then coming out June 26th, Muse's new album, The Wow Signal. This is actually really surprising to me how great it is. Their last several albums have been, varied in their quality. A lot of people have complained about them and don't quite view them as strong. I think they're fine. I'm not the biggest Muse fan, honestly. Like, I like some of their older records, but haven't really followed the band super closely. But I like their previous album was Will of the People from 2022. I thought it was pretty fun. It was kind of billed as like a greatest hits collection with all new songs. It really hit all the different points of their career in an interesting way, but a lot of people just weren't a big fan of it. But this record seems to be gaining some buzz, and a lot of people have been saying it's their best since like Black Holes and Revelations in 2006. So, and I think it's really solid. I really like the opening track, big, bombastic, cinematic, has this kind of orchestration about it. There's some cool like pop and funk kind of moments, especially on like Night Shift Superstar. There's some heavier stuff, some pop moments thrown in the mix, and it just makes for a very fun, cool listen. So I think it's a very strong record. I feel like the makes is kind of tricky. It's not really the greatest makes. It feels very loud, back to those like Loudness Wars days. So that's kind of an unfortunate part of it, but sounds a little bit better when listening like in the Dolby Atmos makes, but still not as good as it could have been. But the songs themselves are super solid, and one of the best records they've done in quite some time, since back in like 2006. I really liked Resistance from 2009, so maybe I'd point back towards that point in time, but a really solid record if you're a fan of Muse. and their style. So really cool to see them coming back to prominence here. And now we get into my top 5 proper. These are the top 5 records from June that I've loved the most, that I want to talk about a little bit longer. The first one is one that surprised me, that has kind of come up out of nowhere. Android Superstation and the album Continuum, which fellow YouTubers who I really respect their opinions are really coming around on this record. It's gaining a little bit of buzz in our little small community. This is a progressive rock band from California, from my neck of the woods, honestly. Their previous album was called This Side of Nowhere from 2020, but this is the first time I've heard of them. It seems like they sent their album to a few different YouTubers, and it's kind of been circulating around. But it's a really solid record. It's right in that lane of like modern prog music that, kind of skirts the lines between, is this really prog or not? Kind of like the Deer Hunter is really one of the strongest influences in my ears. Also, as talking about Muse and their record, there's some Muse influence as well, especially in the keyboards. And I really love the keyboards, how they have kind of this Muse kind of synthy sound to them, but then they also will infuse some more classical inspired kind of piano stuff in their mix as well. But there's some heavier, more rockin' tracks. There's some more laid back kind of, setting the scene type tracks as well in moments. But it makes for a really solid listen that I think was really, really fun. It's a little bit more on the, less polished side. They're probably a more independent band, so their sound is a little bit more raw on how the album sounds itself. But the performances, the just quality of the material kind of overrides that and makes for just a really fun listen through, where every track has something unique and interesting baked into it. There's a lot of catchy hooks and a lot of fun moments. There's some pop influences, and it just is a really cool album that I think a lot of people need to check out. So if that sounds like interesting to you, I think this is a solid recommendation. Probably one of the most interesting recommendations I think I'm going to be giving. A lot of these other ones are ones you probably know about if you watch my channel and so forth, but really solid record. Number 5, it slipped into my list. Fantastic. And I'm loving it more and more as I listen, so it could raise up even higher as I continue listening to it. At number 4, I want to give the shout out to Yes and their new album Aurora. Everyone should know who Yes is if you watch my channel. Just one of the biggest symphonic prog bands of all time, legendary in the 70s. They basically kind of laid the blueprint for the prog rock that we know today. And their new record is really solid to me. I really enjoy it. I know some people aren't as big a fan of it. It gets some criticism. I saw it recently on a biggest disappointment of the year list. But I really like this new iteration of the band. I think they're gelling really well. And I think this album allowed them to experiment a little bit with some different sounds and flavors, and not just try to ape the sounds of 70s Yes, but try to carve their own path with some interesting new things that they're doing. And I think it really worked well for them. I think it's right on par with Mirror to the Sky, which I really loved, their previous record. The lineup here of Steve Howe, Jeff Downes, Billy Sherwood, John Davison, and Jay Schellen. Really solid new era lineup. I know a lot of people miss a lot of the classic, members. A lot of people feel like if John Anderson's not involved, it's not truly Yes. But I like this iteration. I like that they're carving their own path and doing their own thing. And I'm always a champion of bands continuing existing and making more music, and not being pressured to quit just because the so-called fans don't like this iteration. They're obviously passionate about what they're doing, and I love the music. I think the opening track Aurora is super strong. Ariadne is one of my favorite tracks of the year. I think it's super creative, lending some classical influences into the mix. And there's some surprising shorter tracks that are a lot of fun as well. Like All Hands on Deck brings this kind of deep purpley, kind of heavier rock moment to them, and Outside the Box brings these kind of interesting vocalizations with some quirky instrumentation. I really like what they're doing here, and I think it deserves a spot in this top 5. So Yes is Aurora at number 4. All right, next we've got Exploring Birdsong and Every House We Built at number 3. This is from June 26th, so very recent. This one just came out, and I just completely adore this record. I adore this band. They're a young 3-piece from Liverpool, and they're fantastic musicians, young, artists who are just trying to carve their own path. This is the first full-length record, even though they've been around for several years. They've done a couple of EPs and different singles. But this is an incredible full-length record. And I know a lot of people might not be as into this because it definitely is a poppier album. It's kind of blending the worlds of prog rock, prog metal with like more, pop aesthetic, female-fronted pop music. But it's just so well constructed, such well-written songs. And Lindsay Ward is a revelation. Her voice is one of my favorites in the musical landscape, full stop. I just think she's an extreme talent. And there's so many beautiful tracks here. They range from quirky and fun and upbeat and poppy to more ballad-esque, just beautiful, with great keyboard playing and piano work and great bass and drum work. They're just a fantastic trio of musicians that I will follow forever. I think they're fantastic, and this record showcases their talent in a brilliant way. And I like the more pop-inflected stuff. I love Kairos, their album Mannequin, which infused a lot of pop elements into their music. And so that never steers me away. In fact, it brings me more into the music because it has these cool, accessible hooks and catchy moments and feels fresh and new and vibrant. And that's what I'm looking for in the best of music. So number 3, well earned. I love this record, and I'll be listening to it more as the weeks roll on. So excited for this one. At number 2, I have OK Goodnight and their album Stop Go, which came out on June 12th. Prog metal, newer band once again. They really impressed me with their previous record, The Fox and the Bird, from 2023. It was on my list of top 16 favorite albums of that year. A concept record that had so much beautiful storytelling and some really cool, like almost Dream Theater inflected prog metal sections, but this really incredible female vocalist. I was just talking about Lindsay Ward from Exploring Birdsong, but Casey Lee Williams of OK Goodnight is on the same level. She's also a fantastic vocalist who showcases her talent all throughout this record. This new record is more song-based. It's just really great, well-written, well-crafted songs, leaning more in the heavier direction, of course, than Exploring Birdsong, but they still infuse some pop elements, some modern stuff into their makes as well, but a little bit more experimental and more interesting and different. Their first track, No Sound, experiments with kind of this stop and start kind of melody, which, makes sense with the Stop and Go name of the record. But 22 and Spiral bring the more poppier elements to their work. Top of the Bottom brings the heavier and gentler kind of sounds. The Game brings a more playful and clever aspect. And then you've got something like Call Me Away, which is a beautiful ballad, which brings in these jazzy undertones and great piano and acoustic guitar. So they run the gamut between a lot of different things on this record, and it all works well for me, and I love how it's another group of younger musicians. Of course, they're influenced by bands probably like Dream Theater, Haken. I hear some influence of like Mars Volta and things like that. But they're carving their own path. They're sounding fresh and vibrant, and they work well in the current scene. And I'm always looking for brand new young bands who are embracing prog elements, but bringing it into the future and making it sound modern. And they're doing it in a fantastic way. So, OK Goodnight, Stop Go, fantastic record. Check it out if you like modern prog metal. And it gets my highest recommendation. I love it. But I decided to go at the number 1 spot with Artificial Silence and their record Hollow Drift, which came out June 12th. Prog metal from the US as well. And I've just been falling in love with this band lately. I've been listening to their first record, Negative Space, which I heard back when it was released. It came out in 2018, but I hadn't heard it in so long that it almost felt like a new, fresh record as well, listening to it leading up to this new one. And this is just a really unique, cool, creative band. And I love how they bring this kind of prog metal, but bring it through the lens of like some really interesting different flavors that you don't typically hear all the time in prog metal. So it makes it more unique. They have this kind of piano-based approach, a lot of keyboard and piano really prominent in the makes throughout this. So it's not just purely guitar-driven like a lot of other prog metal. And they have these fantastic like harmony vocals and these swirling harmonies, and certain parts of their sound almost lean towards like an a cappella like the shadow just is like a full-on a cappella vocal that leads into the next song, Fear and Retribution. They have almost like a Deer Hunter-esque sound to them at times as well. Once again, this kind of modern alternative rock, alternative metal sound. They have some ties to like, I'm reminded of like Native Construct, who only had one record, but they have this kind of like throw everything at the wall kind of approach where there's just so many elements all the time that it sounds like this kind of circus of different sounds and vibrancy, which can probably be a turnoff to some people, but to me is just really exciting because you never know what's coming up next. And there's just so many things that are going on with this record. The only criticism I could raise to this record is that it feels a little bit disjointed. The first half of the record is more of the shorter tracks, and then it ends on this like giant epic 23-minute epic, which is absolutely fantastic and the highlight of the whole record. So it makes those first few songs feel a little bit throwaway and less important in comparison to what comes at the end of the record. Not just that final epic, but Tidal Lock, which is a 10-minute track that comes right before it, which is a great like kind of shorter epic that's a little bit more gorgeous and haunting, and the epic itself like goes through so many different movements and things. There's this cool section that's like circusy music like you might hear from the early Haken days, but the song just somehow keeps improving as it keeps building and keeps bringing new layers and elements. It's just fantastically done with a big epic conclusion. So, and those shorter tracks, when you revisit them, are actually pretty solid and really great as well. So it's a really fun album that I've been enjoying more and more, and I think more ears need to hear this. I think a lot of people would enjoy this who like kind of the modern prog metal landscape, and who like that kind of Haken-esque kind of playfulness and quirkiness. So those are my choices. I think this is a great number one and one of my favorite records this year for sure. Very creative, very ambitious, and very fun to listen to. All right, so that's it for my June roundup. Hopefully you appreciated those picks. I know they lean a little bit more to the metal side of the equation, but that's just what I tended to like this month. So hopefully you appreciate. And like, I never really like the more harsher, like heavier death metal type stuff. So if you're opposed to that, there's nothing like that in this top 5. So they're more melodic based, but with little touchstones of metal. But really incredible releases. Hopefully you'll check out some of these and appreciate this episode. Let me know in the comments your favorite records in the month of June. I'm not sure there's enough in July to do a full roundup for July. I might combine July and August into one episode. So in July I'm doing this separate series of my favorite 40 albums of all time. So I might take a break from this for the month of July and kind of combine it into August. So I think that's going to work well. So thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you like these episodes. I've been having a lot of fun doing them. So thank you guys, and I'll hopefully catch you in a future episode. Bye. Enjoy the music, everybody.